Welcome to the Femsplainers. And hello, Nashville. I'm Christina Hoff-Summers.
And I'm Danielle Crittenden, and I'm thrilled to introduce a distinguished mansplainer, author Joel Stein, who has just written a book called In Defense of Elitism, Why I'm Better Than You and You Are Better Than Someone Who Didn't Buy This Book. He's also the author of Man-Made, A Stupid Quest for Masculinity. So Joel today can explain to us here about elitism and masculinity.
Anything else? I'm up for anything. As a mansplainer, I will handle any and all questions.
But why should we have a male-identified person,
Right.
White, went to Stanford.
privileged,
Right.
a 1471 SAT, I checked.
That's not a number they gave. We rounded to the 10 in my...
We got it, we got it. Why would we want to hear what you have to say?
Yeah.
I've been wondering that my whole life. And the way people are wandering by, I'm not sure, in fact, they do. No, I'm here to defend the establishment from the populist revolt that I think is really, really dangerous, both from the right and the far left. I wrote this book because I got freaked out. I want to know who in this audience, I'm so confused by this event. Like, how many people you all seem to be very far left or far right. Are most of you like Trump haters or Trump lovers?
Okay, let's do a show of hands.
Yeah.
Who are the Trump haters? Okay, Trump fans?
See, I think this is
even. It's
this
50
is kind of great.
Trump adjacent? Trump curious?
But this is great because in my life, like these people don't mix, and to see that happening is kind of the point of why I wrote this book. That like I wanted to write a funny book that tried to get across the fact that we are in a really weird situation right now. That's like when I grew up, if you told me there was going to be a populist revolution in America, I would have thought, oh, there was an economic collapse or like, a horrible Ebola virus that happened or a war. But instead, things were going pretty well, and this seemed like an unforced error where people just wanted to tear the whole system down.
Well, the economy is pretty strong, and all the metrics show that, in a way, we all have historical period privilege. The luckiest time to be born is
and
now.
place. Yeah.
And place. And yet, we're tearing each other apart, and it seems like the stakes are fairly low, and yet the ferocity. And you went out to actually meet both sides. You went to a county in
Miami, Texas.
Miami. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Where they have the highest percentage of Trump voters of any county in the country.
Yeah.
And what did you find? I mean, you reminded me of, actually, you're like a modern-day Tom Wolfe.
That's it. We're done. Thank you.
And no, he really is. His book is not just really, really
hilarious.
funny, but so insightful. And Tom Wolfe, when he was reporting in the 60s, he would go in his white three-piece suit, and he'd go to like Berkeley and interview the hippies, and they would talk to him because he was like a man from Mars. Whereas the New York Times reporter who tried to dress like the hippies, they just had scorn and contempt for.
Yeah.
But you went as a LA elitist. You probably dressed something like this.
Skinny jeans.
They were very skinny.
And you,
painful jeans.
And you tried to understand the people of
jeans.
Miami, Texas. And can you tell us what you found there on this anthropological study that you undertook?
Yeah, I think the main thing I found was I remember sitting on a porch like my second night with a bunch of people in Miami, Texas, and they had fed me chili and cornbread, and we were having this amazing time and just sitting on this porch, and no one was looking at their phones, and I was like, this is kind of idyllic in this warm Texas night. And then one of them said, did you think we'd all be racist? And I sat there and I didn't know what to say because I was trying to find a way, like a nice way to say yes. And I went with no, which was nice, but didn't get across the yes part. But what I came away kind of thinking from them is that, to me, there hasn't been that much change that's occurred in the last 5-10 years. but then when I saw it from their perspective, it was like, oh yeah, like gay marriage just happened. And like, I didn't know about transgendered people or what to call them that long ago. And the Me Too movement is pretty new. And they feel, I heard the Cambridge Analytica guy put it this way, that there's a lot of straight men who feel closeted right now. Because they feel like they can't be who they are in public and they can't be normal. And what I found was this white Christian group of people, look, you feel acceleration, you don't feel speed. And even though they're still the most powerful group in America, they're less powerful than they used to be. And for them, that's an existential crisis. And they don't like Trump, but they feel like he's the only one that can stop this.
Well, you went to Miami, you got new great friends.
They liked you.
They tried to convert you to Jesus.
They
as a
still
Jew.
are. The church there's very few people in town, but there's many churches. And the first Baptist church of Miami, which is kind of a cocky name because there were not enough people for a second Baptist church in Miami. They have a little mimeograph sheet every week, and there's like 10 people they pray for, and one's like the president, and one's the military, and then there's a rotating group. But I've been on it for 2 years every week. I mean, it freaked me out. They sent the stack of them to me, and they've been praying. The whole town, or at least this church, has been praying for me every week.
But maybe they still think you're sick. But
well, they think I'm Jewish. It's kind of the same thing.
But you pointed out that you knew very little about them, and they knew a lot more about you and where you came from. There was just a difference there in perception.
Right, but did you learn something positive aside from the fact that the obvious observation is that these are people who feel, as you say, powerless, that things have changed, that they don't feel they're being represented?
Not powerless, but less powerful and ever shrinking.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you also went in your journey to the other side. It was like a tale of two cities, except it was a tale of two cultures. And then you went to the left populist movement.
And the woke dinner party I've ever heard of.
Well, the dinner party host, who lives 4 houses down from me, Stephanie Miller, was on this stage right before us.
Okay.
And that was...
Say no more.
Yeah. And she hosts these resistance dinner parties that I went to.
In Beverly Hills, the resistance.
It's not Beverly. It's
adjacent.
It's Hollywood, yeah. We get very specific in the liberal elite about exactly where we live. Beverly Hills, those people are different. Those are like housewives of Beverly Hills. We're the hipster Silver Lake types. So yeah, so I went to see these two different worlds, and I did feel like the people in Miami, to my surprise, knew my world better than I knew their world, because they had seen like television shows about people like me, whereas I hadn't really seen shows about them. And plus they travel. Like when they go on vacation, they're likely to go to a city, and I'm unlikely to go to a oil and gas ranching town.
No.
Yeah.
But what you eventually learned from both right and left, that this elite that you are trying to defend is the credentialed elite, which rests on expertise, mastery of complex issues, education, and that there is another elite, which I think Trump belongs to, of wealth that's maybe plutocratic, that also feels powerless. And it's why you can have this strange phenomenon of people from Miami, Texas, looking up to a man with golden hair, or Tucker Carlson, or Sean Hannity, or Rush Limbaugh, who are very wealthy people, and identify with them and feel that they are speaking for them as populists. And it was really two elites fighting for domination: the intellectual versus who you called the boat elites.
Yeah, and that's true in England too. You can think about Michael Gove, or you can think about Boris Johnson, all these, Cambridge Oxford types who are now populists. So, yeah, I read this really cool essay from 1900 by Vilfredo Pareto, this Italian fascist economist, called The Circulation of the Elites, which was the first time that word elite had really been used. And he argued, which I think Nietzsche had argued too, that there's always an elite. There's always 20% of the people who rule in both economically and politically and culturally, and there's a constant fight between these two groups of people, and I call one the intellectual elite, and I call one the boat elite, because Trump made this amazing speech last year in Minneapolis after railing against the elite for the entire election, he suddenly said, wait a second, we're the elite. Like, we have bigger houses and we have better boats. Like, we are the ones who should be called the elite. And then he started calling himself the super elite instead of the elite, because he only knows like 7 words. And I was like, yes, these are people who care about owning a yacht compared to like having a TED Talk, right? They're people who own boats are the worst.
But people who give TED Talks can be problematic too.
They're not great, but they're people who own boats.
They can be terrifying.
They can, but we don't have a law where if you make a TED Talk and you go 12 miles outside of our country, you can do whatever you want. Like, boat people are scary.
But the TED Talk people, and I'm not speaking about all of them, but just to speak about what can go wrong with elites, is they can be so annoying.
Well, that's the conclusion. The end of the book is like, because I'm really writing a book for the elite of how we can save democracy before the boat elite trample it. And the conclusion I come to is the conclusion that the nice people in Miami kept saying to me in the nicest way possible, and in fact, everyone's been saying to me my whole life, which is that I'm smug. And I think the smugness is really what people object to more than any of the actual policies. And if we can just, like my mom and so many liberals I know think that if we can just explain things, like people in the middle of the country are voting against their interest, and if we could just explain Medicare for all and in a simpler way so they can understand, then we'll win them over. And that's not it. Like, people vote altruistically. Like, the same reason that rich people, liberals, will vote for higher taxes, soybean farmers will vote for Donald Trump. They're voting for what they want America to be and the values they really have. And it's not that they're stupid, it's not that they're uneducated, it's not they're voting against their own interests. It's that they have a different vision of what America should be. And we have to engage on that level and not the we're superior level.
Well, and then the we're superior, there are major institutions in the United States, like the college campuses, the educational system, that have really let people down and not doing a good job educating kids. And in the case of universities, going so far over to the dogmatic left, where there is a lot of indoctrination going on. And it's for them then to be smug about it. And I think we could say it's happened in journalism, and it's happened in the entertainment industry. And I can see if you're from another part of the country, you're going to be talked down to by these people who are not really experts, or or their expertise is so misguided. So you understand the frustration. And what's good about his book is that he sympathizes with
or
that.
we are experts at one thing, and then, I mean, I used to do this. I used to get called to go on like CNN or Fox or MSNBC, or I'd go on the Bill Maher show, right? And you show up on Friday, an hour or two before you go on. They give you a stack of things to read so you can argue about them.
You have to be an expert on the Panama Canal.
That's what you were given. I was given the telecommunications bill once.
Oh my God.
And I was like, and luckily there was like someone from the left and someone from the right, and they had their talking points on it that they could just repeat, but I'm not with a party. So I should not be talking about the telecommunications bill.
Yeah.
And yet that's what people do on television. Just because you're an expert at something, you shouldn't be talking about something else, and I really try not to do that now.
Well, but you pointed out also that, and this is true of the right and left, that the problem is that people want contradictory things. They want free national health care and expanded Medicaid, and there being these false choices that right now, if you look at the Democrats, you look at the Republicans, either way they're going to get things that they hate. If you want health insurance, you have to believe that men can get pregnant. Or if you want less immigration, you have to let your president take bribes.
Wait a minute, are you saying men can't get pregnant?
You lost us on that. Wait, go back to why are men getting pregnant?
Well, men.
And
we
how
have
do we
to
protect
accept.
ourselves?
No.
Because I'm concerned now.
We're talking about trans men.
Oh, trans men.
Oh, trans women. I'm sorry. I should say trans women. That we have two parties.
Right.
None of which is really addressing
this issue.
The interests of people in the center. And what you pointed out is that the people who tend to defend Trump is they would like to see maybe some sort of immigration policy without being called racists, But in order to do that, they have to stick up for, taking bribery and, trying to get the Ukraine to help you with your political campaign. And we're in this kind of angry moment where, and on the left, it's not a better serving on your cafeteria tray,
Yeah, I think I know.
Sorry, was that confusing? Do I need to mansplain that to you?
You do. I'm still worried about getting pregnant.
Is there a chance? Did you make a mistake?
I've been less than perfectly careful. Yeah.
Okay. We see. Anyway, where were we?
No, but we're in this moment where we need elites because you want expertise, right? But you can't give everybody everything that they want, and then we've muddled them all together in these competing forces where we can't have any kind of centrist. I'm kind of a centrist. Discussion of real solutions to these problems that have become partisan and intractable.
Yeah, well, we started to talk really, really bluntly about social issues during. People kept saying the 2016 election wasn't about, it's just insulting people. It's not about issues. And I thought, no, this is the first time in my lifetime we've talked about issues. Like, we're talking about immigration, we're talking about race, we're talking about nationalism, we're talking about what it means, who gets to be an American. Like, I thought that was a real. It wasn't debated on a very high level, but the issues themselves I thought were real, and I think people are siding all over the world with populism right now, and that often comes with corruption, and it often comes with anti-immigration, and it often comes with lowering your interest rates to zero until you're like Venezuela and you're wiping your butt with leaves and eating zoo animals. This is kind of. Populism does not have great results historically. You wind up with Cambodia when you throw out all your intellectuals. And I want to do whatever I can to help stop that.
Pol Pot was an intellectual.
Yeah, but he wanted to be the only intellectual. Like, Stalin wanted to be the only intellectual.
He studied in Paris.
Well,
and he was, but you're right, you don't want to.
But Kim Jong-un also went to boarding school, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what does it. But I thought you made a profound point, because the boat intellectual, say Tucker Carlson, who you interviewed, they've decided, these are Republicans, they still call themselves Republicans, who for the past 20 years, I know Tucker from his Weimar days, he wanted to, defend the Constitution, rule of law, help minority rights, but now suddenly you noted that he is willing to throw out democracy if it means having a populist agenda and maybe making more money at Fox. I thought it was a more materialistic reason, but in fact, you have seen these types of Republicans lose faith in the very institutions that they used to support.
Yeah, maybe I've been thinking about the elite too long, but I feel like in many countries, France, Greece, England,
Hungary.
Our country, I feel like the parties are splintering, and you're winding up with an elite party and a populist party, and it's no longer about how much capitalism you want to dip in how much of my communism. Like, I feel like that discussion feels very old to me right now. Instead, people are talking about globalism versus nationalism, and I think a lot of people in the Republican Party who are hanging on by their nails would be happy to leave for some kind of centrist neoliberal party.
But what's so frustrating to me is that this country was founded on the philosophy of pluralism. It was
in Latin. In Latin.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the understanding that you had different factions and we had to cooperate. So that meant that you had to have discussions and you had to make concessions. And what's dangerous right now is that, again, another institution that's failing is Congress not able to pass laws.
Yeah.
And
I'd almost rather have a Congress that didn't pass laws. I feel like we're getting at the point where people are done with democracy because they feel like it's too slow. I think a lot of people feel like, Plato predicted this in the Republic. He said, people want direct democracy. And our founders were really smart, and they prevented us from having direct democracy. Like, they created the Electoral College, for whatever you think of it, and they created the not having direct election of senators.
And as Plato pointed out in Book 8, if you have a ship and you've got the captain and he knows the laws of navigation and he understands, the weather, and then people think, no, we don't like, they throw him overboard, and you end up, have fun for a few days, and then you sink.
Yeah.
And this was, of course, Plato was a bit of a fascist, but never mind that.
Well, he was. He didn't think democracy would last because he thought eventually people get frustrated because it's so slow. The whole idea of compromising is way too slow.
But the founding fathers understood that.
And slowed us down.
And they slowed us down. And why can't... But I think it's a problem that young people don't study civics anymore. And there are a number of tests about the low information American who don't, can't...
You can say it, Florida.
It's it's everywhere.
But mostly.
And
if you shake the map, it all
Fairleigh
falls
Dickinson
down
University
Florida.
did a survey. We just see, can you name, one of the branches of the United States
I'm
government?
just saying the University of Florida didn't do the survey. It was a college in Jersey.
They couldn't name, they confuse the 10 Commandments with the, 10 Amendments. They're confused and not being taught civics at all. And I think we're paying the price.
But also, we didn't used to, and there were lots of bad things about this too, but parties didn't, just allow anyone to, any person in their party to vote for any person who wanted to run for president. And in my state, I live in California, I'm voting on things I should not be voting on all the time, both in propositions. I vote on judges. I would vote for her. She looks convincing.
Yeah, that's even a judicial robe almost that you're
that's
wearing.
better than the math.
Yes, there you go.
I like
that is literally
Ruth Potter
more
over that.
information than I have on the actual judges I vote
Yeah.
for. At least I know she's liberal and likes RBG. That's more than I know when I pull those levers for judges. So yeah, I think people are upset because it's slow. I think a lot of people feel like we voted for Donald Trump. He won. We wanted to kick the Mexicans out, and they're still here, and that's wrong. And I don't like democracy anymore.
Are you sounding didactic? You're sounding a little like a toxic male.
Yep.
So
Good-
let's talk
good segue.
about your
Great
other
segue.
book.
Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about
What's
the
wrong?
closeted men, which I think is part of this anti-elite eruption, that you went in search of masculinity. Is that a fair way to characterize
Did you really have
it?
to
Seems
search for it?
insulting.
Yes. No, I'm fine with it.
I mean, we've got some scotch and bourbon
We
here
haven't
on
given the guy a
table
try.
if it'll
I
help.
don't know if I can handle this.
But there
want
is
some of this?
there is right now this real anger, as you say. By the way, cocktails is always part of our podcast, or booze in
But
some
we
form.
were too disorganized to get the champagne because this is the elitist.
You gals are all class.
You get to
Took
drink
me
out
into
of
your
the
room
bottle,
and you
too.
opened the mini bar.
Well,
We did. We raided the minibar. But no, let's talk about this perception that the GOP is dominated by white angry men. That white men are angry.
that's a girl drink. You like it, right?
I'm a girl drink drunk. My favorite kids in the hall. Sketch.
So let's talk about how masculinity and thwarted masculinity plays into this.
Yeah, so for background, I wrote a book 7 years ago. I was having a son, and I realized I was utterly incapable of raising a son. Because when I grew up, I had all my friends were girls, and I had a glass animal collection, and an easy bake oven, and a sticker collection, and
Are
I
you
don't play sports.
a gay male trapped in a heterosexual male's body?
I literally told Conan O'Brien that on TV. Yeah,
Oh.
I am precisely that.
Because I'm a gay male trapped in a female body. But never
Yeah,
mind.
and
We'll get to that.
by the way, the way we talk about gender now is so useful for me.
Me too.
Thanks for transgender people, because I was like, I think I'm really straight, but I'm not very male.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to express that or even think about that. Now I feel
know.
Well,
great.
my husband has sometimes said, except for the having sex with men part, I'm really quite homosexual.
Yeah, oh yeah. Otherwise, it sounds fun.
Into
Yeah.
history and interior decor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do.
But let's talk about
yeah,
men.
so I
The
decided to
problem, the crisis. Let's call it. Let's be Washington here. Let's call it the crisis of masculinity.
Well, since I wrote that book 7 years ago, I feel like the problem has become exacerbated because there's a lot of people who live near me who just feel like we've got to tone down our masculinity and traditional masculinity. And I think we've become more comfortable not having to pretend to be tougher than we are, be hard all the time, and be like guys from the 60s and Mad Men. So I think that and transgendered issues, I think all of that has come to the fore. At the same time, there's this like hyper masculinity that we're also seeing now that is so much more intense than even when I grew up. Even if you look at like Disney characters now, they're just like huge and cut, and just this whole hyper masculinity of guys like insulting each other and screaming at each other, and that's what politics is now. And something's going to give because there's two really different visions right now for kids.
Well, isn't it like the sort of boat masculinity and intellectual masculinity?
I think this great change, this great populist wave in the world occurred for so many reasons. There was just a lot of change happening at once. There was the knowledge economy. There was people moving to the cities. There was globalization. There was this diversity that was kind of happening in a lot of countries. There's immigration. But to me, the thing that really moved the needle possibly more than anything else was women gained a lot more power, and men. I'm fascinated by Gamergate, for instance. Like, I think there's a lot of super, super threatened men who are very angry.
I know a lot about Gamergate, so be careful.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to
because there are a lot of myths.
Yeah.
And it was just like a lot of, mostly guys, about 20% girls, and they were just attacked relentlessly by these cultural critics who were like, oh, there's, not a sufficient number of female players. And the gamers eventually just sort of rebelled, and then they were immediately tarred as toxic masculinity and alt-right. A few of them were, but the best surveys I've seen, they were mostly either apolitical or libertarian. And there was this just vicious, relentless attack carried on by the mainstream media, New York Times leading the way, against millions of gamers. And it didn't drive them to the alt-right, but it did alert them to the fact that you really can't trust the experts. Some of the leading journalists just willfully misunderstood that story. But anyway, go on.
Well, everything you just said is totally true. But I would also say there's a lot of guys, and I'm probably among them, I don't play video games, but culturally I was among them, who were playing a game where they were like shooting hookers, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, why is that a problem? And then they got yelled at for it.
Wait, just to correct you, they were shooting hookers, but they were shooting everybody. Everybody.
Right.
It was,
but there was purposely a lot. There was a seedy town, and I'm talking about GTA, but there's a lot of games in which there's misogyny in the games. There's a lot of violence.
And you lose points if you shoot the hooker.
Right, and the women all in those games have giant boobs, and they're like dressed in a certain way.
And the men are all buff.
Christina. I've forbidden Christina to talk about Gamergate, as I forbade her to talk about Game of Thrones, because we'll spend this whole podcast on Gamergate. But
I've never seen it. Yeah, I saw the pilot.
No, Joel, let Joel answer. Let Joel answer.
Okay, what you're saying is true, but the vision you're creating of super buff men and giant breasted women and murder and stuff is a specific fantasy, a male fantasy, that a lot of women found offensive. And they told them directly, these men, and they were very hurt. The same way they got hurt, like, I love Ghostbusters and you're changing Ghostbusters.
Okay, so did men come into women's magazines and take exception? We don't like the way these women are too skinny. They're not, they're overly, like consumerist. Did men come in and critique Mary Claire and give us, lessons on what should be on Oprah and what should be on The View?
Well, no, because it's not affecting them.
No, wait a minute.
If you're the aggrieved group.
How did it affect the women?
I feel like a lot of women no longer want to live in a culture where violence and sexuality were kind of placed together, and they were angry about it.
So you're saying that the video games were causing some violence?
No. I don't think video games cause violence. I think there's a culture out there that women were suddenly not accepting. And that's in the workplace. That's things I did when I was young, I can no longer do. That's a fact, right? And I can either be pissed off about it, and I probably am.
What did you do when you were young? Because you can still be canceled.
I can be, and I wrote about it, and you can look it up, and I'm not bringing it up again.
Okay.
But I did things I have apologized for. I haven't raped anyone, but I still. But I. So
at least that's not what they called it back then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the culture changed, and men had a choice, and it's not an easy choice. It's a choice of either like going back to see what you did, and if it was wrong, or you can say, what I did was normal and everyone is being overly sensitive and screw them and I'm not listening. And that's a much easier choice. And I think that's a big part of what both Gamergate and the current cultural situation is. And I think you're looking at a president who's increasingly only representing men. If you look at the polls,
but can I be fair to men? Can I be fair to men? A certain type of men?
Yeah.
Like, I don't see the president as representing men any more than I see Don Draper representing men.
And there are a lot of women who support the president.
Not as many.
Not as many.
No.
not these days.
I mean, we've never seen this in a president before, where there's a gender split this dramatic. Like, something is changing.
Right.
And some people don't like it. And it's causing tension.
But that's why people should listen to the Femsplainers, because we try to bring both groups together.
Yeah.
We sympathize with both. And why I loved your book is that you went and talked to people at both extremes. You made friends on both sides and were kind of able to see their point of view. And that's what worries me, just as a philosophy professor, because to become a philosopher, you become capable of thinking yourself deeply into both sides of an argument, and I can see both sides of some fundamental metaphysical arguments, and I can do that in politics. So I never get that upset because I can understand both sides. Plus, I'm related to very extreme leftist family, but never mind that. I can see that. I love them. But I can see both sides. But so much now, there's demonization and just complete denigration of anyone who disagrees with you, and we cannot make progress that way.
Well, this audience, we saw, was pretty split. So, I mean, I don't know if that's Politicon or you guys, but I find that to be really
Nashville?
heartening. Or maybe Nashville. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, even the very elite and woke Meghan Markle said yesterday, we can't have women's equality without men. And part of the message men are getting that is confusing, I think, is from women themselves, which is they want men to be less manly, but they also, they want them to be manly, but also without being sexist and domineering, and leaving everyone confused because.
And then they read 50 Shades of Grey, which becomes the bestseller. It's confusing to men, I think, to read it.
And then you see on porn women doing things that, I think is every male fantasy, and then men get surprised that women don't always do those in real life.
I haven't seen porn, but I've heard that there's a lot going on that's worth checking out.
We know your GPA. We've researched your porn history.
Yeah, we have your whole Pornhub history, actually, and we were just going to bring that up.
Yeah, it's not my favorite site, but I get your point.
What is your favorite site?
It's a little soft. I think it is. I'm 48. I think for younger people, it's slightly less confusing. The idea of being masculine in certain ways, in certain situations that are traditional masculine, and then in other situations not behaving that way, and knowing when it's wanted and isn't, I think is easier for the younger generation. It's hard for us to wrap our head around.
Well, you had the Man book was a similar anthropological exploration as your Elitist book was, and you went hung out with firemen. You went to the Boy Scouts.
I fought a UFC fighter, Randy Couture.
Right.
I did boot camp for 3 days in the Army and fought. And General Mark Hertling let me fire a tank.
Yep.
Yeah.
You went to boot camp?
Yeah, in Fort Knox.
Oh, that sounds so
not far from here.
But you came
unpleasant.
but you did come
to. It was unpleasant. But it was great. I'm so glad I did it.
How was the wine?
The wine at boot camp was not good. Plus, while you're eating, they stare at you and yell at you to finish, and it's very, very intimidating and scary.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
I did boot camp as a reporter too for a week, and
you did?
I did, and it turned out I was a really good marksman.
Oh, that's
very
wonderful.
good shot, which apparently women are very famously good shots.
So when I did,
like
everyone
snipers.
thought I was actually in the military. Did you do that, or did you?
No, I did it. They didn't know. Most people there
Man.
didn't know as a reporter,
Yeah.
so I had to go climb, go in the tires and
That's-
things that are useless in war. But I did.
Who'd you do that for? That's awesome.
Canadian Army.
No. Wow. Okay. Hold on.
Yeah, not the real army, according to
You were a
you.
Canadian.
No, is it a Mountie? Anyway, you said something because I want to get, before we open up to questions, because we'd love to hear from you actually, and not just be up here pontificating like
And
elites.
think about your questions, because if you don't volunteer, we're just going to choose you. Because I
but-
was a teacher for 22 years.
So you had two conclusions from each book. In the elitism, you said, like, you were looking for big solutions, and you talked to people about how were we going to mend this toxic relationship that is currently going on in our country. And you said at the beginning that it was an exercise on your end, to stop being smug. It said you listen to others. You said, I learned that gathering on your porch with neighbors is better than sending text. I've learned that old quilts, the one went for comfort over pretty, are better. And I've learned to entertain strangers. That was your sort of takeaway from being basically being humble, discovering humility. That's something we could do on both sides. On men, you said this, and I love this. It said, I'd always been ashamed of being a man. We're hairy, smelly, inconsiderate, violent, and will stick our penises in nearly everything. But throughout my man ventures, I saw the virtues of masculinity. Our hormones propel us towards challenges. When there are no challenges, we bet on other people's challenges. And when we lose those bets, we celebrate as if we met those challenges ourselves. It's a pretty fun way to look at this life, this confidence and optimism. And you said one of the great joys of being a man is not making a big deal out of big things. So is that like a good summary? Do we all have to learn to be more humble and not make a big deal out of big things, and maybe not make a big deal out of really little things like, can men get pregnant? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm still not sure about that. But yes, I mean, I think this book, maybe it's just my philosophy of life, and it probably is because I'm non-confrontational. But yes, I think I wrote a funny book about this horrible political moment because I want people to realize that we've gotten out of control and ridiculous and to chill out. And then not that the things we're fighting about aren't important, but just to fight in a civil way that we don't tear the system of democracy down so that we can no longer change anything.
And how do you preserve masculinity in a time where we're not really allowed to acknowledge that there can be such things as male and female
I grew
traits?
up in a time of free to be you and me, and you raise your kids without
Did you play with the
gender.
doll?
I was given dolls. I didn't play with those, but I didn't play with guns either. I didn't play.
You didn't play.
But
Except the glass, the spun glass animals.
oh, I still have them.
Oh.
I do in my house
Glass
in LA.
figurines.
Oh, it's a menagerie.
Oh.
Menagerie. Yeah, but I raised a son, and I realized that they come with genders, no matter what you do. They're going to turn anything into a gun, even their penis. That's just who they are, for the most part. I mean, everyone's different. There's a spectrum, but there are genders. So I don't think we're where we were when Marlo Thomas, who I love, and I love that album, but I don't think we're at that place anymore. I think we're at a much more realistic place.
But I just have a question about your parenting skills, and I don't mean this
No,
personally,
please, they're not great.
but there may be a need for an intervention.
Yes, that's right.
You have a son,
Yes.
Laszlo,
Yes.
age
10.
10, and you sent him to a Federal Reserve camp?
Well, in his defense,
You sent
that
him
was
to
for a story,
camp?
and I was there. It was only a couple hours.
You were there?
I was there.
Okay.
But to
And
learn
it was for a
about the
story.
Federal Reserve.
But you learned about the Federal Reserve more than I spent time
Nerd.
with Dilbert's
Nerd.
creator Scott Adams, and I am a nerd. And so is Scott Adams, but he claims, and he graduated business school, and he doesn't believe, he's a big Trumpist, he doesn't believe in facts, and he doesn't believe the Fed does anything, much like Bernie. Bernie wants to put a farmer on the Fed board. And it's just that's so crazy to me that we wouldn't be eating for two reasons if that happened. So I am worried about people who don't believe in expertise, and I believe in showing your kid how the Fed works at least 7 or 8 years old.
Okay, we've got some time for questions. If we can keep them short, because I see a line actually forming. So first, a mansplainer. Hello, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name's Jason. I just had a question about when you want to affect a change in a genre that you feel underrepresented in. My perspective was always that you create something new that does represent you, and if you're offended, you don't purchase the thing that offends you, therefore you're not offended. But that may not be the best way to affect a change in a medium.
Sounds good to me.
Entrepreneurial.
What's your perspective on if you want to make a change in video games or
Yes.
rap music
Exactly,
or TV?
video games. Then if you don't like the video
Don't
games,
buy it.
make the video games you like.
I'm not for banning anything, and I think if you can create something that has a different perspective, that's amazing. But I also believe that criticism is a valid field.
Okay. That seems fair.
Yeah.
It's not as good as creating something. If you can't make, you criticize.
But we can have both.
Yeah.
There's also
But
Mr.
not. But
Market.
the canceling should be
But
limited.
isn't that the problem that you raised
I agree.
earlier? Then you make Ghostbusters female, and then it doesn't do well at the box office, and then you scream sexism. I mean, that's kind of a problem.
Well,
Because
It's
it wasn't
not a
that
problem.
good.
It just doesn't always work.
Hello. I hate
Hello.
my voice, gosh.
I like it.
Oh, thanks. I'm Sunny, and I hate to go back to the Gamergate question, sorry for the rule.
I'm ready.
All right. As a female gamer myself, I am totally against the Gamergate thing. Why do you think that there were certain people that came for the gamers? Because, I hang out with guys all the time. They think that, that they're toxic and things like that. And I'm still just the girly girl, I wear makeup, I watch Jeffree Star, I'm just, a regular girl. So why do you think that those type of people, I don't know, what do you call them, SJWs or whatever, why do you think they came for the gamers? And do you think media had to do anything to do with that? And why were they involved?
It's everything to do with the way the media handled it. Because there was a reasonable disagreement among gamers, and there's some fantastic female game developers, and they had some problems, and they were working that out. But then the cultural critics came in, and there are all of these sort of gamer websites, and they sided with the cultural critics against their own fans, against their own followers. So it was a betrayal. And to make this clear, gamers are blamed for everything. And it worries their parents that their child, and you will know this, a young woman or a man playing, young boys playing games, and their teachers and the media, they want to, every time there's a mass shooting, it's the gamers. And it was the Dungeon and Dragon players and all, and they want to blame them. And then they wanted to blame them for sexism, racism, and the New York Times recently had an article blaming them for everything bad. It became a symbol. And it just became a convenient and lazy caricature. And it was a very bad thing to do because there are millions and millions of gamers.
Brandishing fake guns.
And they know how to vanquish, an attacker.
Or democracy. Yeah, or democracy.
They weren't enemies of democracy, but some were. There were crazy characters at the periphery, just as in any mass movement. There are crazy people at the fringe of,
It's also parental ignorance, because we all as parents get mad when our kids spend too much time in front of video games, whatever they are. Then I went and watched the video game that my son was playing, and he was managing a baseball team, a franchise. He was learning business, and I said, honey, you just keep playing that, okay? You don't have to set the table tonight. Some of these
When I was
are
a kid,
very
we played games
intelligent
where
games.
we were baseball players.
Well, I was a champion of gamers, and as I said, I'd never really played a video game except for something in Cambridge in 1981.
You played Pong.
Pong. And then I watched some video games like Grand Theft Auto, and I was horrified. It was so violent. And I would prefer games based on Downton Abbey and something pleasant and lovely and aesthetically pleasing. However, I feel that way about novels. I feel that way about films. I don't criticize people if they like to go and see adventure movies or and I don't think people are going to become murderers because they like Alfred Hitchcock. But people feel, go ahead.
These are the most elitist references I've ever heard. You call them adventure movies. And then you went with Alfred Hitchcock.
Well, okay. Umbrellas of Cherbourg. I like Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
All right, next question.
Hi, I'm Kelly Pollock. I'm one of the two broads talking politics.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hi.
Hi. So I'm raising two sons. They are 8 and 5, and my 8-year-old especially is highly intellectual right now. How do I encourage him to remain intellectual if that's what he wants to do in a culture that is saying that intellectualism is bad?
Intellectualism is bad.
We had a guest on our podcast, not to promote another book right now,
No, in defense of elitism.
but let's buy it now. Megan Cox-Gurdon has written a book called The Enchanted Hour about the importance of reading aloud to your children, even when they get past the age of reading. And she did all the science behind it. And just the very fact of carving out 15 minutes a day to read together has absolutely
That's cool.
incredible effects on children, and especially boys, because there comes a point where, as you say, that 8 to 10-year-old boy ceases to be so interested in books, and yet when you read to them, they can understand books that are above what they
That's
can
right.
read.
I read much higher level books, still do, to my son.
Right.
And he will read himself.
Right, and you are doing. If you can do,
I
they
read him
say
Tom
like if you
Sawyer
can
when he
do.
was really young, and he dug it, and he would never
Right.
have read that. Yeah.
Right. If you can do one thing for your kids aside from, not get divorced or whatever the stats are, read to your kids.
But I'm going to add one more thing. If you have a gifted child, don't assume that the educational system will be on your side. There's kind of a war against meritocracy, and they are shutting down
Yeah.
elite programs.
Oh, these are my people. I'm glad I came. Look at this. Everyone's
and you have to
nodding.
be your son's ally. You do, because don't assume. I mean, if you have a gifted child, the educational system can be as problematic as if you have a child who has a learning disorder. I mean, they just might not be there for him, and you have to assist his education.
Right. Hello?
Hi there, my name's Sarah. I wanted to ask you guys the question you asked us in the beginning. Where do you think you fall on the spectrum of pro-Trump, Trump-adjacent, anti-Trump, and specifically, if you had to choose, what presidential candidate do you support the most right now?
Oh, Christina knows who she
Oh,
supports.
I'm so yang gang.
Have we learned nothing about picking a businessman with no experience? He seems great. I want to hang out with Andrew Yang, but there's no lesson learned apparently.
He sees into the future.
Yeah, and he ran an SAT prep course. This is all great. I want him at my dinner party.
Yeah. Well, who else is there?
Anyone with some experience?
Who else? Mayor Buttigieg? Yeah, I like him. And a different Republican. So I'd like...
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping maybe a different Republican.
Did you want to answer that question? Or you're not going there.
Who do you support?
I've been scared of Donald Trump. I registered as a Republican to vote for Ted Cruz in California. I was so scared of Donald Trump.
That's weird.
Anyone but...
No, it's actually clever when you think about it.
I was
No.
deeply afraid. No, it wasn't about gaming the system and who would help me
Nobody
as a Democrat.
thought he could win.
Who, Cruz?
Oh, you did. Trump. You thought he
No,
could. Oh, you
at
did?
that point, I was deeply, deeply afraid.
Okay, read this book then, because he has insight.
I was freaked out about Donald Trump. No, I didn't think he'd win. I thought he'd get crushed by Hillary Clinton, but anyone who gets the nominee has a chance of becoming president, and I didn't want him to become the nominee. So who do I support? I, as an elitist, have known Cory Booker since I was 19 and think he's the most impressive person I know. And so I would love him to be president. I don't think Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders can win in a far-right time in the world. So I think it's just too dangerous to pick them.
And in a sane world.
No, I mean, I don't know. In a different world, they may be great, and maybe I'm wrong. And maybe
Not our
there's a
world.
populist fervor, and then they'll take a left populist to the White House. Maybe Bernie would have won. I don't make predictions anymore, but it just scares me because I think they can be labeled as socialists and they'll lose. So anyone else on that stage, save the people who aren't politicians. Marianne Williamson, who's a lovely person, and Andrew Yang, who seems like the coolest guy in the world.
Coolest guy in the world.
Oh, hang on. We got
Gang,
more
gang.
questions. We got more.
But what
questions.
about you?
I'm partial to Cory Booker, but I'll take. And I'm a Republican. or was recovering Republican. But
And
I'll
I'm a self-hating Democrat.
So anyone who is not going to, like Bernie Sanders, send us into Venezuela-like times and doesn't hate other people, who can bring civility back. Next man we have a couple more minutes, so let's go fast. Suns, the man in the Suns jersey. Hello?
I actually kind of forgot my question, but now I remember it. So you kind of brought up video games again, and I kind of wanted to follow up on that.
Big video game crowd.
Why do you think the mainstream media and there's just a lot of animosity towards video games in general? I mean, we mentioned Gamergate, also in the 90s against video, all the guys who were against video games. And now, Donald Trump bringing up video games causing mass shootings, and why do you think that cycle always perpetuates with animosity and hatred against video games and people and gamers?
I have no idea. I only know that it just goes on, and the media has been so reckless and irresponsible in feeding this prejudice. And I don't see the end of it. But I think it's, maybe the sort of thing where there's a new medium that people don't understand. And so people used to think, that television could cause blindness and that the radio was going to corrupt the youth. And, so maybe it's just projecting their fears. But again, the journalists, if you're out there, research this and tell the truth about it, because it's just been a smear campaign against an innocent group of people.
Okay, 4 minutes, 3 questions. Let's go. Let's go.
Thanks. I'm Kyle Day.
Hi, Kyle.
I'm really fascinated in particular by the elites discussion, especially and how it shows up in the rural-urban divide. You could probably guess where I'm from Iowa. I see this on the Midwestern states like that as well, where we're fairly evenly split as to which side of that has more power, rule in urban. It depends on issues, and if just looking at it on the national level, especially with there's of course a lot, and you've talked about many ways in which the elite bear a good deal of responsibility for what's this kind of cultural breakdown and how we're not getting along with each other. As somebody who lives in this part of the country, I would just like to hear some suggestions, if you have any, as to what we can do to make this healing. There's a lot, of course. You mentioned, Mr. Stein, about the folks in Miami, Texas, knowing more about you than you knew about them. That's certainly a great start. Is there anything more that you can tell me, somebody who lives in that part of the country?
Great question. More than just being humble.
I like when he called me Professor Stein, didn't he?
Yeah.
That was amazing.
He has a master's degree.
Oh.
Which is one of the 5 signs
of
being a sociopath. No, I'm sorry.
It is. I got it at the same time as my undergrad. It was like a bonus degray. Does it still count as crazy?
It's problematic, but it's okay.
Hey, guys, 2 minutes. Let's go. How can we solve this whole mess? Quick. You're on.
I guess just give thought to the experts in your own life and in your own situation. And I just think yelling at your doctor because you read one WebMD article, or yelling at the TV and really believing that you could do a better job than the NFL coach. These are signs of, or that your tweet is just as good as the Council of Foreign Relations guys' take on Syria. Just humility for everybody. Just people are doing their best. There's not a secret organization that's trying to control everything and keep money from other people. We've built a pretty good world, and just appreciate it and a little bit of gratitude and realize how lucky we are.
That's great. And also look at the sources of those stories you're forwarding. Don't forward fake news, really fake news. Okay, quick. We have 1 more minute.
Oh my God.
Over the past 6 years, we've seen with Bernie Sanders and then Trump a kind of distrust of the elite and the desire to kind of upheaval it and put people in place that they feel would better serve their interests, meaning the people who they don't see as the elite. And then with Trump, we see this kind of desires, this kind of relief of please give us back these people, while still having some of those same core issues being unaddressed that cause people to want this upheaval. How do you reconcile this idea that people want this change and they want the upheaval, but they also still want people in the White House and people in government that they see as competent and responsible and fit?
Good question. We'll have to end on that, but yes, go.
My fear is that people don't really want someone responsible in charge. I think there's a desire to drain the swamp and get rid of the FBI and not listen to the CIA and not have a State Department, and maybe there have been candidates who want to get rid of the Fed. I don't know.
Want to stack their Supreme Court. Want to get rid of the.
But isn't that the vote elite problem that it goes back to these two sides where if you want to have some immigration control, you have to be tossed into the far right, and if you want health care, you have to be tossed into the far left. That we have two baskets that are not.
But I think it's more like guttural and emotional. It's like we want people who operate from the gut, and we don't trust people who use sneaky laws and are experts. I think it's more than these issues. I think it's a real distrust of the people in charge and this desire for everyone to be in charge of their own lives, and then we're all equally good at everything. I don't know. This whole idea of operating out of your gut is the thing that scares me more than anything.
So we need more experts like the femsplainers.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
So polite and civil. This is amazing.
Joel is going to be signing books after, I think, somewhere here. We'll find out where. And we'll be around to meet and greet and answer any more questions.
Will you be in the same place as me?
Maybe.
Good.
As long as it's an elite club, I'll be there.
It will be. There'll be a rope, big bouncer.
Did you drink this whole thing?
You drank it.
Oh, I didn't. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Femsplainers. Keep up with us on Twitter and Facebook at Femsplainers and on Instagram at Femsplainers Podcast. Send questions and comments to contact@femsplainers.com.
A big thanks to Ella Ryder, our research and in-studio production assistant, and to Nat Frum, our audio and video editor. And we're proud to be part of the Ricochet Network and grateful to the American Enterprise Institute for allowing us to record in its studio every week in downtown Washington, D.C.
And miss something? You'll find everything you need at our homepage, femsplainers.com, including links to past episodes, our sponsors, where you can sign up to support us, and even to merch. And please don't forget to like us or give us 5 stars on iTunes.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.